Is the meeting over, guys? Did the meeting end, Congressman? Still going? Congressman Kildee saying the meeting is still going on because at least that's one of the things that we're tracking here, trying to wait for leadership and hear if they have any public guidance that they want to share that they offered to their colleagues in that room. But again, there has been such a mix of lawmakers on background and off the record telling reporters that they're concerned. Will they share that in the room with their colleagues is one question. And then once all Democrats are together, will there be some kind of moment where they either all come out and say, we're going to put this to bed, Biden should still be the nominee, or will this griping continue both publicly and privately, Anna?
And as we've been following the last several days, we have heard from lawmakers who have called on the president to step aside from the campaign. Yeah. In the Senate, however, it has been more wait and see, no defections in that chamber, at least not yet. What are you hearing ahead of their meeting?
The Senate is certainly one of those places that we watch closely. And we also know that it's one of the places that President Biden himself watches closely, having served in that body for so many years and respecting the role that his fellow senators play here. There was conversation, and we were able to report about very early efforts from Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, trying to talk to his colleagues about concerns that he might have, potentially putting a meeting together for when they all got back in town on Monday. That meeting, it seems, never materialized and instead will happen during their usual Democratic caucus lunch on the Hill. This is a usual meeting place for them. It's not new or noteworthy that these Democrats on the House and Senate side are huddling together. They do this weekly when they're in town. Of course, the topic of conversation is all about the standard bearer of their party. And look, there have been no Democratic senators willing to come out and say that Biden needs to resign his place atop the ticket. There have been a handful of Democratic senators, though, willing to say, Anna, that they have concerns and they need President Biden to show, not just tell, that he can do this, that he can carry the Democratic standard all the way across the country and across the finish line in November against Donald Trump.
Peter, the stakes are just incredibly high today with these Hill meetings and President Biden set to host foreign allies. What are the White House expectations?
Well, I think the White House, at least for this moment, feels good. The campaign apparatus as well, that they have sort of fortified this dam, preventing it from being breached right now. Those 7 Democratic House members have come out. As Ali said, no members of the Senate so far coming out publicly. There were some critical words from Senator Patty Murray of Washington, a member of the Democratic leadership yesterday, saying, among other things, that we need to see a much more forceful and energetic candidate on the campaign trail going forward to better convince voters that Joe Biden deserves another 4 years in office right now. But yesterday really represented, and I think it's a strategy they'll take going forward, a new effort by this White House with multiple outreaches. First, the president speaking to Morning Joe here on MSNBC, the letter to lawmakers on Capitol Hill, conversations calling in to the influential Congressional Black Caucus, speaking to donors as well, where he said, among other things, the Democratic Party has spoken and that the nominee is me. He is not yet the nominee, though certainly the presumptive nominee, with a convention scheduled to take place in the middle of August next month here. The president also indicating, he said, I'm not going anywhere, and said basically that Democrats need to cut out all these distractions and this sort of intra-party debate right now and focus on Donald Trump. In the words of President Biden, he's the one who needs to be in the bullseye going forward. And the president's going to have a chance to try to do that when he speaks, not to the NATO event that takes place this afternoon, the opening remarks, but really on Thursday during that solo news conference. I think that is the date to circle on the calendar. Lawmakers have raised it to me. Aides have recognized the significance of this moment as well. Anna, this is the first solo news conference President Biden will do here in Washington in exactly 20 months. It was November 9th of 2022, the last time he held an extended solo news conference here in Washington.
And the president has often said, watch me, when asked about the concerns related to his age. We're also learning about some of his past examinations by doctors. There was a White House letter last night from the doctor there at the White House confirming President Biden was examined by a neurological specialist for each of his last physical exams, so one each year. Lay out what we learned in this letter.
Well, so this was really trying to answer some questions about his health, especially after that tense White House briefing where Karine Jean-Pierre said for a variety of security reasons, as she detailed it. She was not in a position to talk any further about this. Dr. Kevin Kennard, a neurological specialist, particularly the specialization he has being in Parkinson's disease, why he had been at the White House 8 times in 8 months between last summer and this spring. The letter ultimately going out, writing in part, Dr. Kennard was the neurological specialist that examined President Biden for each of his annual physicals. His findings have been made public each time I've released the results of the president's annual physical. President Biden has not seen a neurologist outside of his annual physical. That means he has seen a neurological specialist, a neurologist, during each of the 3 annual exams he's taken at Walter Reed. But specifically about those 8 visits here to the White House, it left a lot of people asking, certainly members of the media yesterday in the White House briefing room, why he had come those 8 different times. And according to this statement from Dr. Kevin O'Connor, the president's personal doctor, the Dr. Kennard had been here for, quote, regular neurology clinics at the White House Medical Clinic in support of thousands of active duty military staff who are assigned here. Left unanswered was whether President Biden's name was ever a subject of any conversation with the president's personal doctor when Dr. Kennard was here. But the hope was very clearly, Anna, to sort of put these questions to bed, to end this conversation. And to be clear, Dr. Kennard or Dr. O'Connor said that in his previous visits with him during the annual exam, there were no findings consistent with Parkinson's, MS, or a stroke. Anna.
All right, Peter Alexander, thank you. Ali Vitale, stay close. Keep us posted as people come out of that meeting. And now joining us, Biden-Harris campaign co-chair, former Congressman Cedric Richmond. Thanks so much for being here. As we have laid out, President Biden has shored up some support from key groups there on the Hill, from the Congressional Black Caucus to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, Minority Leader Jeffries, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, members of the Squad, Senate Majority Leader, I should say, Chuck Schumer, and no senators, as we mentioned, have come out and asked Biden to step aside. But at least 9 House Democrats have asked Biden to step aside from the campaign. Here's some of their reasoning.
The input from my constituents has been 10-1 in favor of replacing President Biden on the ticket. There's a real risk of a Republican Congress if we can't unite and have a stronger effort.
I would say, Mr. President, your legacy is set. We owe you the greatest debt of gratitude. The only thing that you can do now to cement that for all time and prevent utter catastrophe is to step down and let someone else do this.
Our constituents are bringing it up. The country is bringing it up. And the White House, campaign strategy of be quiet and fall in line and let's ignore it simply isn't working.
What is your response to those criticisms?
Well, I don't have a response to them because it's a distraction. The president laid out in his letter yesterday that he was committed to 2 things. He's committed to finishing this race, and he's committed to beating Donald Trump and making sure that America remains on the bright trajectory that it's on. And so what I've always learned from my grandmother and mother is that actions speak louder than words. And if you look at the president's actions and accomplishments, they're historic, from reducing child poverty, taking care of seniors, largest investment in climate, the first infrastructure bill in decades. That's all action. That's accomplishments. And then on the other hand, if you look at Donald Trump, you see talk is cheap. And so I would just urge my Democratic colleagues to stay focused on the main goal, which is to protect this country from Donald Trump and ensure that the historic gains and accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration continue.
But what is your message to Democrats who are worried Biden could drag down ballot on key House and Senate races?
Well, I don't believe that to be true. And so what I would urge colleagues to do is go out there and knock doors, make calls, talk to their constituents. I've been elected before, and your constituents vote for you. And members have an obligation to go out and campaign not only for themselves, but the top of the ticket. But here's the major thing. We as Democrats need to talk about what we stand for, and that is rebuilding this middle class, bringing this country together, unifying the party. That's what we stand for. And if you look at the other side, they stand for destroying a woman's right to choose. You look at Project 2025, which is an utter disaster now, which people would look at. If you look at the Supreme Court and how important that is. So that's why I say we need to stay focused on what's at stake here, what's at risk, and the best person positioned to beat Donald Trump is the person who beat him last time, and that's the Biden-Harris ticket.
And yet we are hearing from Democratic lawmakers and others who are allies of the president question whether he is the best person to beat Donald Trump. President Biden has said pushing him out of the 2024 race would disenfranchise Democratic voters who have picked him in the primary. Give you that. But some Democrats say there are still alternatives that give voters a voice. A new op-ed by James Carville, a veteran of Democratic campaigns, most notably Bill Clinton's, writes Biden won't win and proposes that the Democrats hold a sort of mini primary with 4 historic town halls, he says, and that would happen before the convention in order to at least explore potential other nominees and other options, all because of what was seen on that debate stage just a couple of weeks ago. What do you say to that?
I will again say the debate stage was words. The debate stage is performance. I would say look at actions and accomplishments. And President Biden has been able to do things that no other Democratic president has been able to do. So we have to look at what he's able to do, not just words. And look,
but isn't it connected?
President Biden?
Isn't it connected?
President
when
Biden,
they see
no,
him perform, if you call it performance, that is action as well, and how he's able to articulate his policies for the future, not just what he's accomplished in the past. And there's a post-debate CBS YouGov poll that found that the share of voters who think Biden does have the cognitive health to be president actually dropped from 35% to 27% after that debate. Now, this was before his ABC interview. It was before the Morning Joe interview yesterday. But can the American people be sure President Biden won't have more mental lapses like what we saw at the debate?
Well, it was a bad debate performance. And it's the same thing that happened to President Obama. He had a bad debate performance going into his reelection, and it's been consistent with other presidents also. So I would once again say, look at his accomplishments, what he's been able to do as president, and then we need to stop giving the other guy a pass. We're here talking about a debate performance. We're not talking about a twice impeached president. Both times it was for his own political gain. He withheld money from Ukraine so that they would investigate his political opponent. He tried to lead an insurrection and stop the peaceful transfer of power so that he could remain in office. He was just convicted of 34 felony accounts for lying to the American people so that he could win the election over Hillary Clinton. So the more we talk about this, the less we're talking about the threat, clear and present danger of former President Donald Trump. And so you have a person of great accomplishments, great character, and on the other side you have an habitual liar who always places himself in front of the American people. And I don't want us to distract from that conversation because of a few people. And look, I'm not dismissing any concerns, but the president has answered them. The president has been out there on the campaign trail since then with rallies in Philadelphia, rallies in Wisconsin, going to church in Philadelphia, doing interviews. The president is out there. He is addressing those concerns. He's showing his vigor. He's showing his determination. And we should support that and keep going forward.
You just laid out the contrast. So why is this race so close, though? This is a historically ripe opportunity, right, with an incumbent with a strengthening economy against a divisive opponent who left the office in disgrace.